Hi, this is John Lineval, and this is Elements to Know for the SAT Essay Part 4, Common Rhetorical Tricks and Logical Fallacies. So, in case you haven't watched the other three, this is a generalized SAT essay prompt. As you read the passage below, consider how the author uses evidence such as facts or examples to support claims, reasoning to develop ideas and to connect claims and evidence, it's stylistic or persuasive elements such as word choice or appeals to emotion to add power to the ideas expressed. So I'm going to have to write an essay in which you explain how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her audience that whatever the author's claim is. In your essay, analyze how the author uses one or more features listed in the box or features of your own choice to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his or her argument. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. Your essay should not explain whether you agree with the author's claims, but rather explain how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her audience. Three elements that the SAT wants you to describe are ethos, pathos, and logos. They are described without the name and the instructions, so they talk about evidence, that's ethos. They talk about reasoning, which is logos. Notice it's not pathos, even though people always list it as ethos, pathos, logos. So those sneaky College Board people, they purposely put that there. So if somebody doesn't know what pathos is, they might say, oh, pathos must be reasoning because that's the second one, and logos must be style and persuasion because that's the third one. No, logos is logic, which is reasoning. Pathos is stylistic or persuasive elements to add power to the ideas expressed. So, again, you have to write an essay explaining how the author builds an argument to persuade the audience of the truth of whatever the author's claim is, and how the author uses those features to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his or her argument. And your essay should not explain whether you agree with the author's claims, but rather explain how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her audience. So the second element there is pathos. Ethos, pathos, logos. Pathos is defined as appeals to emotion, rhetoric, style, etc. So argumentum ad misericordiam, for example, is an appeal to pity. So that would literally be, I'm pathetic, I'm sad. So one argument might be, we should believe in God because it would be really horrible. It would just suck if God didn't exist. Or, I'm sorry I was speeding, officer, but I'm having a really bad day. I just got fired from my job. Well, being fired from your job has nothing to do with how fast you were driving your car or the danger of driving your car. If anything, it's probably more dangerous because you're upset and not paying as much attention. So if you were driving fast and paying attention, you'd be fine, but you're driving fast and already distracted. But anyway, it's worth a try to use it to see if you can get out of the speeding ticket. It's worth a try, I suppose, with any argument to see if somebody might give you a pass just because you've shown, oh, I'm really sad, I really deserve a break. So the informal structure of this argument from philosophy.lander.edu/logic, misery, so, misericordium, misery, get it? Person L argues statement P or argument A. L deserves pity because of circumstance Y. Circumstance Y is completely irrelevant to P or A. So if I got fired from my job, it has nothing to do with your exceeding the speed limit. Also has nothing to do with the existence of God or whether the New York Yankees are the best baseball team. So it's irrelevant. So statement P is true or argument A is good because, as they'd say at McDonald's, you deserve a break today because you're having a bad day, something else didn't go your way. Obviously, that has nothing to do with anything, so it's just an appeal to pity, and it should be ignored. Argumentum ad populum, as you might guess, sounds like popular. It's literally an appeal to the people, so if enough people believe it, it must be true. Well, the problem with that is, at one point, everybody believed the sun revolved around the earth, and certainly when people realized, no, the sun is actually the center of the solar system, not the earth, so the earth is not the center of the universe, it's not even the center of the solar system. People didn't believe that. There were only a few scientists, a few astronomers who really said, oh no, that can't possibly be right. So, as this album cover says, 50 million Elvis fans can't be wrong. Wanna bet? They could be wrong as far as is Elvis music good music. Well, it depends on how you define good music. If you define it by what Elvis fans like, then no, it's a tautology. Obviously, Elvis fans would be the authorities on what they like. But I'm sure there are lots of ways you could judge music that I'm not an authority on, which would say, no, Elvis is okay, but he's not that great. Something like that. Anyway, it's a logical fallacy because it depends on an irrelevant fact. Many people like Elvis's music. While that would prove his music is popular, that doesn't really prove it's good, especially because the goodness or badness of music is very subjective, and it would really depend on what the standard is for determining goodness or badness of music. So that is the argumentum ad populum. Or like that old Dr. Pepper commercial, I'm a pepper, you're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Okay. Argumentum ad ignorantiam. As you might guess, it's an argument from ignorance. So the gist is that since no one has proven it, it must be false, or since it hasn't been proven false, it must be true. Well, here's an interesting copyright-free picture of God. So, drawing of God. So, the existence or non-existence of God has not been proven. I don't see how it could be proven or disproven. But so some people would argue, well, since the existence of God hasn't been proven, it must be false. And other people would say, well, since the existence of God hasn't been disproven, it must be true. Neither one is really carried by this argument because, they're both equally true since there's no way to prove it. So you're just saying we don't know. That doesn't really convince me that either argument is true. The God of the gaps, some people would say, well, okay, if science can't explain something, then it must be evidence of God, something that's way smarter than human beings, that designed everything, therefore there's a God. That's a little bit of a problem as well, because it just means we don't know it yet. But, hey, if you go back far enough, we didn't understand where lightning came from. You thought it was, God gets angry and just decides to zap random things. So we know that's not true now. And the same argument can be used with God, UFOs, telepathy. Again, you can go to philosophy.lander.edu, logic/ignorance.html. These are all in the description below. Don't worry about it. So, arguments from ignorance, as the name implies, are pretty ignorant. That's not really the best argument for anything or against anything. Non-fallacious use of the argumentum ad ignorantiam. Okay. So there are some things that are actually useful uses and non-fallacious. So, for example, the legal presumption of innocence in the English, the British legal system. I know you purists will say, there's no such thing as a British legal system, John. Scotland has its own separate legal system. Okay, thank you very much. Anyway, the English legal system that's used in pretty much everywhere in the former British Empire, including the United States, Canada, India, etc., it assumes legally that someone is innocent until they're proven guilty. That's not really a logical assumption or a factual assumption. Certainly somebody who was arrested and actually arraigned, indicted, blah, 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 brought to trial, probably has plenty of evidence against him or her. But the idea is it's more practical to make the prosecutor prove guilt rather than make defendants prove innocent. Because, well, the defendant does this all day long. Not the defendant, I'm sorry. The prosecutor does this all day long, goes through the trial system, whereas the defendant, hopefully, this is the first time they've ever been in this much trouble. They're not familiar with how the court system works. And I believe it was Blackstone who said, well, it's better for 1,000 guilty men to go free than for one innocent man to end up in, to be imprisoned. And I'm sure I got that. It's definitely not a direct quote, but that's the idea. Is wrongful punishment is worse than the guilty going free because you're having the state commit an injustice against an innocent person. So that's not really logical or factual. It's just saying we're going to assume that this person is not guilty until we've given this person any benefit of the doubt that we can. Also, when we don't see evidence of something, despite serious attempts to find the evidence, we assume that it's false. So under philosophy.lander.edu, there's a comment regarding DNA crystallization. It's assumed not to happen, even though it was eventually shown to happen. But until it was proven, they said, well, scientists have made some really, really strong efforts to try to crystallize DNA, and it just didn't work, so maybe it just can't be done. But nope, turns out they were wrong. It could be done, just someone hadn't done all the things that you have to do to get DNA to crystallize. But makes sense that if people are making the best efforts they can and it's still not happening, there's a good chance that it can't happen. Argumentum ad Verecundiam. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. If that offends you, I'm sorry. Doing the best I can. Anyway, an appeal to inappropriate authority. If you've seen the other videos in this series, you know that I've talked about Albert Einstein because he's a favorite stock character in Glurge. So Glurge is basically those silly emails and Facebook posts that you get from your weird relatives and friends that always have these little morality tales. So the Albert Einstein one I'm talking about is where a professor says that, well, how can there be a God if there's evil in the world? Okay, very common argument. And so he gives some quotes about morality. Well, actually, Professor, evil is a lack of good, dark is a lack of light, cold is a lack of heat. So, the idea is by analogy that dark is not really anything, it's just a lack of light. You can't measure the darkness other than just measuring by how little light there is. You can't measure coldness except by measuring how little heat there is. So therefore, well, evil is a lack of goodness and morality, which means a lack of God, which means God exists. Trouble is that Albert Einstein never said any of those things. Albert Einstein also, as far as I know, did not say that the definition of insanity is repeating the same action expecting different results. That actually came, I believe, from recovery programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs. Philosophy, war, I've seen it quoted to Albert Einstein to say, "It is impossible to simultaneously prepare for and prevent war." He may have actually said that one, but even if he did, even if he said all of them, Einstein's expertise is in physics, not philosophy, war, diplomacy, theology, or psychology. Therefore, he's no more authoritative than any other non-expert in fields other than physics, where he definitely was an expert, mathematics, or related fields. Einstein said something about math, I'd believe him. Said something about physics, I believe him. If he says something about psychology, maybe I believe him, maybe I don't. He does have a great quote where he said, "I don't know how World War III will be fought, with what weapons, but I do know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and clubs and rocks, because the idea will be reset to caveman days if human beings even exist after that." That's a great quote, but again, most people would be able to figure that out. Well, yeah, if you blow up the world with nuclear weapons, what do you think's going to happen? We're all going to revert to freaking caveman days. And you can find this at www.snopes.com. Fact check, false, Einstein humiliates professor, which, as you might guess, means that this is false. But you can look it up. You don't have to believe me. And hey, maybe you should. Maybe you should check things that I say. Anyway, ad Verecundiam is not a fallacy if the expert is one who should be believed in the relevant field. So if Einstein said something about physics, especially his theory of relativity that he invented, he thought up, yeah, I would believe him on that. And there's no reason to believe that the expert is wrong. Somebody who is a math professor can make a miscalculation in math. So anyway, this is very similar to the non-fallacious use of argumentum ad ignorantium, that if you would expect to find this evidence through the methods that you've used, there's no reason to show any bad faith. Yeah, probably true. So, okay. Ad baculum, does that mean it's an appeal to Scott Bakula, the star of Quantum Leap? No. And it's also not an appeal to Blackula, the blaxploitation movie. So, ha ha ha. Ad baculum means appeals to force or threat. So if you take action X, consequence Y will result. For some reason, I believe unrelated bad thing, let's call it B, will happen, although B is not a logical consequence of X or Y. Therefore, you should not take action X. I've heard people say things like that about the economy. Oh, if you vote for this person for president, there'll be an economic slump. Didn't explain why. Just said, oh, there'll be an economic slump. Well, that doesn't really follow from a certain person being elected. I'm not talking about the current president by any stretch of the imagination. This is someone who ran decades ago. But one of my friends said, "Oh, if he won the election, there'd be an economic slump." Okay, well, I don't know about that. So obviously you use scare tactics. Well, your kids won't be able to go to school. You'll end up having to sell your house and move into an apartment, blah, blah, blah. Wow, those are all frightening things. So if you're not backing them up with any credible evidence, this is a fallacious use of ad baculum. There could be ones that are true. If you can show that it will lead to consequences you don't want, then that's just logical consequences. So now we're here at ignorantio ad elenchi. I will admit I don't know how to pronounce that at all. That's an irrelevant conclusion. philosophy.lander.edu/logic/ignoratio. Well, that'd be a nice thing to name your kid. My kid is named Ignoratio. No, please don't do that. Anyway, the logic is sound, except the conclusion doesn't really relate to the original question or proposition. I don't know if you've ever had an argument. I've known people who they'd start an argument. When I would show them why they were wrong, then they would change the premise. So, oh, but you would agree this. I'm like, well, sure, I'd agree with this thing that isn't what we were arguing. That's all that is. So, for example, a straw man, this is creating a distorted, weakened version of the opponent's argument. It's kind of a weaker version of the really ridiculous ignorantio ad elenchi arguments, or elenchi, whatever, by showing how, anyway, it creates a distorted, weakened version of the opponent's argument, then points out how ridiculous that argument is. That is, let's say you said, well, we should offer extended unemployment benefits to people who were laid off because of COVID-19. And someone who's creating a straw man would say, oh, so you think people should just get paid to do nothing? What are you, some kind of lazy bum yourself? You don't want to do any work? Hey, if nobody does any work, how is our economy going to work? We still need to create physical things. You must be a real idiot. Well, that's not what you were saying. You're saying, well, no, I just said we should offer a little bit more money to people who don't have jobs right now because they need it. And as I was starting to say before, that itself is a weaker version of just a complete, ignorant thing where you're just using a red herring, where you just make something up out of whole cloth, so to speak, where you're just putting words in someone's mouth and you just kind of ignore the argument that the person actually made. So anyway, often a good indicator to a straw man argument is a beginning phrase similar to, they have given the argument, or our opponent would have you believe. You hear that all the time in politics. As soon as you hear that, your BS detector should be pegging, should be screaming at you, wee, 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 wee. That, maybe I should see if this person actually made that argument. Especially if the argument sounds ridiculous. If it sounds ridiculous to you, chances are the person, no matter how much you don't like their politics, also didn't really say that. If it's too good to be true or too bad to be true, it's probably not true. So, in a real-life argument or debate, you also want to watch for someone who's trying to put words in your mouth. Like, in this case, the person might be saying to you, you think everyone should just get whatever they want for free, don't you? People will try to do that. When I was discussing something about people who lose their jobs over naughty pictures getting out on the internet, things like that. This woman was saying, well, everybody has pictures like that out in the world, and you just want people to get fired, don't you? And, you would think somebody whose pictures were leaked because their internet was hacked, should lose their job. And I'm like, wow, you've put so many words in my mouth. I'm surprised I haven't choked on them. I was just saying, no, you have to be careful with what you do because not everyone's going to understand. Anyway, so you want to watch out for people trying to put words in your mouth. Non sequitur. A non sequitur is just something that doesn't logically follow. So that's what I'm saying. The straw man is kind of a weakened version of that because it does follow, but it's distorted, whereas a non sequitur is like the parody of word problems you've probably seen on Facebook or other places on the internet. How much pancake batter does it take to paint your living room? 9, because aliens don't wear purple. Well, 9 what? And aliens don't wear purple. How does that follow from pancake batter? It doesn't. It's a complete non sequitur. That's the joke, is that if you don't understand word problems all look like that to you because they don't make sense to you. Ha 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 ha. All right. And then another form of the straw man is changing the subject. So again, ignoratio explain. You have a debate or dialectical exchange, and it is at this philosophy.lander.edu/logic/ignoratio.html # ignoratio explain. So in a debate or dialectical exchange during the COVID-19 epidemic, a proponent states it's not in his personal interest to wear a mask because it's difficult to breathe through a mask, and besides, masks don't protect that well, since it's been shown that virions are so small that much of any viral load is inhaled through masks anyway. This is a direct quote from that website. I didn't write this. But anyway, the opponent responds that wearing a mask is in the proponent's personal interest because when exhaling, much of the viral load is filtered, which reduces the chances of spreading infection to others. The opponent is committing, okay, it should be ignoratio, not ignoration, sorry about that, ad elenchi, because the argument was not what was in society's best argument, but what's in proponent's personal interest. So assuming that the proponent doesn't care at all about society in general, then yeah, technically it's not in his best interest, it's just in society's best interest. So that is, ignoratio ad elenchi, it's not the same argument, even though they're pretty close. Okay. And continuing more with this argument, the irrelevant conclusion. I don't feel like saying this Latin phrase again. There's the red herring. It's an irrelevant distraction. So you can think outlier cases. The red herring fallacy differs from the straw man fallacy in that the opponent's argument or position is not misrepresented. It's simply abandoned. So again, the red herring, it's stated here at philosophy.lander.edu. So it's just something that's completely irrelevant. So here they say, a law against texting while driving, points out there are many distractions other drivers face, or other distractions drivers face is what I'm trying to say. Basically, well, why should we make texting and driving illegal? Because, hey, even before anybody had a cell phone, people would eat, put on makeup, adjust the radio, CDs, look at traffic signs, billboards, people walking down the street on the sidewalk, blah, blah, blah. But what's anybody doing about any of those things? Who's doing anything about any of those things? That you might know as whataboutism. We've seen that the last couple of years. Certain politicians like to use that a lot. I guess all politicians like to use that a lot. When they're accused of something, they can turn around and say, well, what about this thing my opponent did that doesn't relate to what I did? Even if your opponent did this bad thing, how does that relieve you of responsibility for the bad thing you did? It doesn't. Anyway, so according to Bing, the search engine that Microsoft has on its web browser, whataboutism is the technique or practice of responding to an accusation or difficult question by making a counter-accusation or raising a different issue. It's also called whataboutery. And the example they use here is the parliamentary hearing appeared to be an exercise in whataboutism. Of course, it makes sense that the example would be from politics for the reason that I just explained to you. So again, it's an irrelevant conclusion, is that, well, okay, the fact that there are other bad things doesn't mean that the thing I've criticized is not bad. That's basically what we're talking about here. So, or, you can think of just crazy, irrelevant outlier cases that, well, seatbelts are bad because there was one case where somebody was trapped by their seatbelt and burned to death in their car. It's like, well, yeah, but there are thousands, if not millions, of cases where people avoided serious injury, in fact, walked away uninjured from car crashes because their seatbelt was on. And the whole burning to death or drowning is so rare as to, I'm not even sure that any such cases existed where somebody was trapped by their seatbelt and burned or drowned in their car. So that would be kind of an outlier case, even if it existed. It's like, okay, fine, you pick the one thing that happens one in every few million cases versus all the other times where people were saved by seatbelts. And you can get a little seatbelt cutter thing if you're really that worried about it. Anyway, did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to this channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? Well, it's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I also don't really have 1,000 subscribers yet. I have about 815, 816, something like that right now. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome but encouraged to share links to this video and put it in playlists. I'm also happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls or things that are off topic, spammers and disturbed people. If you want to contact me, you can call me on my cell phone, 415-623-4251. You can also text me at that same number. You can email me at john@johnlinneball.com. You can mail me by postal mail at 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have a copyright issue or any other kind of issue, fine, contact me, let me know. And even more contact information, Facebook. You can reach me at www.facebook.com/Linneball Tutoring. Linneball Tutoring is two words put together as one. Instagram.com/John.Linneball.tutoring. Should probably put more things up on there, but oh well. Phone is 415-986-7355. That's my home office phone if you don't want to try reaching me or can't reach me on my cell. Email is john@johnlinneball.com. Website is www.johnlinneball.com. johnlinneballtutoring.com will also take you to the same webpage. And testpreparation.locals.com is my locals page. I will be putting up some special bonus content, but for right now, it's just more of the same things that are on my YouTube channel. So, I hope you have found this useful and not too horrible. And if you have, again, please like it and share it and let other people know about it. And you can consider donating some money to me through PayPal and all those great links that are at the bottom of the page on this description. At the description at the bottom of the page is what I should be saying. All right. Anyway, have a good night.